I don't think we're going to have anybody volunteer today to be microphoned for the sound effects. But, he's, convenient. How convenient. So we will, I'll point out, you guys can all throw some sound at me. There's going to be some winter noises, going to be a gunshot noise, so get your gunshot noise ready. It'll just be a bang, bang. So if I say gunshots, just bang, bang. That's all we need. So we're continuing on with our childish series. Last week, it went pretty well. Three Little Pigs was a fun one to do. This week we're going to be doing The Ugly Duckling, which was written by Hans Christian Andersen a long time ago. Which makes it very difficult to get this book in a library because there's 1,000 different versions of it now because it's been old enough now, it's in public domain. The story of The Ugly Duckling is a public domain story. So the concept of this creature being born with another family and it doesn't seem to fit right, that story can be adapted into 1 billion different versions. In fact, just a couple years ago, my son was in a play at Batavia High School called Honk. Can you give us a sound effect from that? Thanks. I was hoping no one was awake to do one, but he was the cat in the story, so he wouldn't have really made the honking noise. So Honk was an adaptation of the story of The Ugly Duckling. There's 1,000 of them, and they all have their own little variations, kind of like we did last week with the Three Little Pigs, where we've all heard different versions of the story where sometimes the pigs all survive, and then some versions they get eaten, and there's differences there. That's all because of public domain. You can take that story and you can kind of adapt it. Another thing that goes into public domain this year, if you didn't know that or not, Mickey Mouse, actually, in Steamboat Willie form, the original 1928 version of Mickey Mouse, in the cartoon that appeared as Steamboat Willie, that version of Mickey Mouse is now public domain. So anybody could make a movie with that Mickey Mouse likeness any way they want. And I mean anyway, it happened to Winnie the Pooh about 4 years ago, and there's some disastrous movies out there because of it. But it can be anywhere it has to be, and more power to them. It's creative exercise, public domain, that's what happens. So now we have Steamboat Willie, go nuts, do what you want. That brings us to our story for today, which is The Ugly Duckling. And I think I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm feeling story time mode here. Yeah, that's a little better. When I can get more serious, I can more emphasis on the drama parts. Here we go. The countryside was beautiful just then, for it was summer. Aw. The wheat was golden, the oats were green, and the hay was stacked in the meadows. On the back of the river, hidden well in the tall grass, was a duck's nest. The mother duck had been sitting on it for some time now, and she was growing impatient. Last, one after another, the eggs began to crack. And the little yellow ducklings popped out. Quack, quack. Yeah, get ready for some quacks. There's a few quacks in here. They cried. Just one egg, the largest of them all, remained. Finally, the big egg cracked. Yeah. All right, you guys are awful. I don't know if I'm going to do this or not. This might be a bad idea. Out tumbled a large gray duckling. The mother duck eyed it suspiciously. What sort of ugly duckling was this, she wondered. It certainly looked nothing like any of the others. Perhaps it was a turkey chick? The next day, the mother duck took her whole family to the water. The little ducklings dived and splashed. That's a splashing noise there. Splish, splash. And the ugly duckling swam best of all. No, this cannot be a turkey chick, said the mother duck. He swims far too beautifully for a turkey. He must be my own child. After all, he is rather handsome at that. So, we get our established story beginning here. Oh, whoa, that gets blurry when you go back. Not ready for that. What we know so far is that nobody really knows why he looks different, but he is different in the way he looks. And he isn't really identified by any specific group. It's like, does he belong to this group, or is he part of this animal, or this? What is he? Nobody knows. But it gives us our first lesson in what we can know for ourselves if we were to see ourselves as this ugly duckling, that we were known before we knew ourselves. Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. You were a creation before you were atoms and cells. You were a being before you had character, before you had a sense of humor, your blood type. All those things were already established before they actually became things. You had a place in this world and you were designed for it. Your Creator had a plan figured out for you before anyone else ever had any ideas. Any idea at all of where you belonged or what you should be or where you would go. The world could look at you as being different, but God prefers the phrase set apart. You have been pre-purposed, set apart, unique, special. A creator can envision their creation long before anyone else can even figure it out. Like Michelangelo. Michelangelo would look at an 18-foot slab of marble and just stare at it for months and months, and people would say, what are you doing? I'm working. He was envisioning and seeing, and then after 3 years, it becomes the David statue. We have the sculpture of David. When he was asked about that process, how that came to be, when he could just stare at it and not be just chiseling away and trying to fix this or that or whatever, he said, I saw the angel in the marble and carved it until I set him free. It was in there. He saw it. He knew it the whole time. He set it free. Walt Disney saw Swampland and envisioned Disney World. His development was referred to in-house as the Florida Project to avoid a burst of land speculation and sales and that kind of stuff. People trying to jump on the bandwagon. Walt Disney Productions used various dummy corporations to acquire 27,443 acres of unused land. Most of the owners of that land in the 1960s were happy to get rid of it because it was just swampland. They didn't have any use for it at all. It was meaningless to them. No purpose at all. But Walt Disney could see the angel inside that he wanted to set free. Speaking of swamps, let's go back to our story. And back to my glasses. After their swim, the mother took her ducklings to the poultry yard, where they could be properly admired. Step lively, she told her brood. Look sharp. Don't turn your toes in. Quack clearly now. That was clear. Good job. That's it. The little ducklings did as they were told, and they looked very smart indeed. But the other ducks hissed. Here's an odd one, they clucked. Just look at that ugly duckling. We don't want him around here. And a big old duck bit him right in the neck. Ouch. Leave him alone, said the mother duck. He's doing no harm. That may be, said the big duck, but he is so ugly he deserves to be bitten. That's my big ugly duck voice. I don't know why that line, that's just a horrible line. He deserves to be bitten because he's ugly? That's Hans Christian Andersen. What are you going to do? After that, the poor duckling was bitten and pushed and made fun of day after day until he didn't know which way to turn. Finally, worn out with being picked on, the duckling decided to run away. Down the hill he ran until he came to a great marsh where the wild ducks lived. Maybe he belonged with them? The little duckling tried to be friendly, but it was no use. What an ugly duckling, exclaimed Mrs. Mallard. Just ignore him, said Mr. Mallard. Other birds lived in the marsh too, but they swam away from the little duckling. No matter what he did, he could not find any friends. Suddenly, gunshots. Bang. The shots rang out. Bang. And somebody's trigger happy there. 2 wild geese fell from the sky. The little duckling was terrified. He hid in the grasses and trembled while gunshots echoed all around him. Yeah, just like that. Late in the day, the shooting stopped, but the duckling was still too frightened to move. He waited a few hours more, and then he hurried away from the marsh as fast as he could. When we feel lost or without purpose, it's easy to let fear kick in. Like if you don't know where you belong, you don't know where you fit into the picture, it's easy to be afraid that you're in the wrong place. Like you're the puzzle piece that was thrown in the wrong box by mistake, and like the whole picture is going to be spelled out, and you're not going to fit in it anywhere. There's fear that will kick in with that. It's easy to feel hopeless. It's easy to feel worthless when you don't understand who you are or where you belong. The best place for us to start, though, is to know that we are loved. 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love does what? Drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. So our duckling is overwhelmed by pain and negativity and this hopelessness of being away and separated and not having a chance to think that he could be loved. He's letting the fear win. He's not able to see that it is possible for him to be loved by someone. Back to the story. Toward evening, he came to a cottage. By then, a cold wind was howling. Oh, that's creepy. Whew. But luckily, the door was ajar, so the duckling slipped inside. An old woman lived in the house with her cat and her hen. She was very surprised to find that a strange duckling had moved in as well. But duck eggs were a real treat, so she let the duckling stay. So greedy. It was sure to lay eggs soon, she thought. But when, after 3 weeks, the duckling had not laid a single egg, the old woman grew annoyed. "It can't even lay an egg," said the haughty hen. "What a useless duck," agreed the cat, and it hissed and spat. I tried. At the poor, lonely duckling. One day the door was left open again, and the duckling dashed through it and ran away. He wandered until he found a lake, but there were no other ducks on it. Autumn had come. The sky was gray and the leaves were falling. That's kind of a sound, right? Can you make a leaf falling now? It's noise. Pretty subtle. The leaves were falling. The wild ducks had all flown away. The little duckling was all alone. One evening at sunset, the ugly duckling saw 7 large birds fly past. They were big and white and had lovely long necks. The little duckling had never seen anything so beautiful. He wanted to call out to the birds. He wanted to belong to them. He stretched his neck, longing to fly away with them. But of course, his short wings were not strong enough to fly. Winter came. The days grew colder, and colder snow fell and covered the ground. Yes, exactly like that. The duckling had to paddle around in the lake to keep from freezing. And every day, as the water turned to ice, the hole in which the duck was swimming grew smaller. Finally, worn out, the duckling stopped. I'm going to pause there for a second because it's kind of brushed off as just being part of the story, but this really is the duck accepting his own death. He's stopped trying to move, acknowledging that ice is just going to make his feet stuck, and he has given up. Like this is his bottom right here. That night, the water froze around him. In the morning, a farmer came along and saw him there. He knocked a hole in the ice and carried the duckling home with him. For a long time, the duckling stayed in the farmer's barn with the cows and the chickens. That was nice, right? Good farmer. You see, there is love out there. This duck has no idea who the farmer is. Never experienced the farmer before, has not seen anybody for a whole season. But we were loved before we loved ourselves. John 17:24. Father, I want those you have given me to be with me where I am and to see my glory. The glory you have given me because you loved me before the creation of the world. You loved me before the creation of the world. Not just you knew me, You loved me. Even if you can't see it, love is there. Love exists for you even before you recognize that you have love in your life. On most cruise ships these days, the people who take care of your cabin will decorate that cabin with animals that have been made out of towels. If you have been on a cruise ship, I'm sure you've experienced a towel animal. They began on Carnival cruise ships in 1991 and took off right away because it's public domain. It's a towel. You can do whatever you want. Public domain, people. It's wonderful for stealing things from people. So all the other cruise ships could take a towel and fold it into whatever animal they wanted. And for a long time, it was just, one or two animals like a bunny or an elephant. But the cruise ship companies realized that they could make this a thing, and it was a popular thing that people were getting excited about the towel animals. So they started figuring out how to make more, and they had a laboratory where they're taking towels and, does this look like a duck? No, try folding. Okay, that looks better. Let's do that. They're just towels. They're towels. They had always been just towels. And before the first person ever made one into an elephant, they were loved as just towels. There is no greater love than being a family of four in a hotel room and knowing that there are 4 individual towels available in that room. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing. That towel as an individual towel is loved for the function of being a towel. And then you throw this creative design onto it, you give it a new purpose, you give it new art, you give it beauty, you make it something special and unique. And now people can love that towel as an animal. It's almost like a little stuffed, it's like a teddy bear almost. There are people, I'm sure, that go on these cruise ships all the time that ask for extra towels so that they can keep the animals in the room to play with as animals and use the regular towels as functional towels. I guarantee that's happening. Probably people in this room have done that. Sorry, speaking of animals, back to the story. At last, it was spring again. The weather turned warmer, the sun shone, and the flowers began to bloom. Give me a blooming flower sound. The duckling looked into the sky and felt a strange longing. One day he saw the white birds. Remember those white birds? He saw them return to the lake. He wished so hard to be with them and share their joy. If only he could fly. All at once the duckling lifted his wings. They were much stronger now, and to his surprise, they lifted him easily into the sky. He was flying. Woo! He landed on the water, not far from those white birds. The poor duckling was afraid to go close. He was so ugly, surely they would chase him away. He bowed his head in shame. But what did he see, reflected in the clear water? His own image. But he was no longer a clumsy gray duckling. He was a white bird like them. He was a swan! Ta-da! The other swan swam over to welcome him, and the duckling's heart swelled with joy. He thought of how he had been hated and despised, but it makes no difference. It doesn't matter where you hatch if you come from a swan's egg. Now he heard them say he was the most beautiful bird of all. The lilac bush bowed down to him, and the sun shone warm on his feathers. He curved his graceful neck, and his heart cried out with joy. I never dreamed of so much happiness when I was the ugly duckling. And with that, I'm going to take a drink. Nobody reminded me to, but the story's over, so. So he looked at his reflection and saw that all along he really had been something different. He had just never really valued himself enough to see. Which takes us to the next lesson, that his identity can be reflected in your identity. The duckling was a swan the whole time. That had been true from before the duckling was in that shell. Like I said before, you are who you are before you are who you are. That duckling was always intended to be the swan. But he hadn't seen his reflection in so long, he still thought of himself as an outcast. He couldn't see his own value, his own worth, his own place. He couldn't realize that he had beauty for exactly who he was. 1 John 3, 1 through 3. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be children of God. And that is what we are. Look at your reflections. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known, but we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. All who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. That beauty is there. It's been there all along. You just have to see it. You have to know that it was pre-purposed for you. You were destined to be beautiful. And the real cool part about this beauty and this identity is that it's meant to be shared. Like, there are aspects of who you are that may be helpful for a couple things, or just an identifier. You know, your blood type is good to know for donating blood to a couple people. That you can share. But for the most part, the things that make you you are just more like to keep you in a lineup, to know who you are out of a lineup, to say, yep, that's Jim, just like that. But this understanding of our identity in Christ is meant to be shared over and over again. It is intended to be seen in us and on us, clothed with us, and then replicated and distributed. It's supposed to just keep going. It doesn't just end with us and we see a reflection and say, yep, I'm a swan, always have been, great. It's meant to be shared. It's meant to be distributed. There are now towel animal classes you can take. If you want to learn how to make those beautiful animals out of a little towel, you can take a class. There's a towel animal theater where they do little puppet shows with towel animals. And I'd be willing to bet that probably in the next 5 years or so, we're going to see a cartoon series about the zany adventures of a gang of towel animals. I would expect it to come. The love for the art is spreading. The love for the beauty and the thing that has been transformed from it, that spreads, it distributes, it goes on and on and on, like public domain, just as the case for Mickey Mouse. Now that Steamboat Willie, that version of Mickey Mouse, is public domain, people are free to take the joy of that creation and turn it into new works for the world to enjoy. We could even have a sequel to The Ugly Duckling, where the Ugly Duckling encounters an anthropomorphic mouse in overalls on the river, and the two of them travel downstream together looking for lost animals to save. And you know what? Okay, so since we're making stuff up, let's throw in a towel elephant as well as their sidekick, and he can help dry off all the stranded animals that have gotten wet on the side of the river. That's a show right there. We got something. 2 Corinthians 5:20. I'm going to end with this. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the what? The righteousness of God. He who had no sin became sin so that we could have righteousness. And we are his image. We are his creation. His love is supposed to be shared.